guys! Today we'll be recapping a manhwa called My Unexpected Marriage. Please remember to like and subscribe if you enjoy the video, as it really helps our channel grow. Thanks. Meet Lorett Brumaire. Like most noble girls, she always knew that one day she would have to get married to a man chosen by her parents. Finally, that day has come. Standing before her irritable father, she has no choice but to accept whatever he chooses for her. Between her father and half-sister, Lorett isn't very well liked. You see, as an illegitimate child, she's basically the black sheep of the family. She's always been told that she should never dream of taking their family's titles, and expected to be grateful for every little thing her family provides. But for once, she doesn't want to bow her head and act obedient. The Duke her father has assigned to her has just had all his property confiscated and is even suspected of treason. I mean, how much worse could he get? Her half-sister laughs like a maniac. She's furious that Lorett has dared to talk back and launches across the room to deliver a stinging slap. Wow! And her father is just going to sit there and watch? What kind of family is this? Even the maids are ignoring her. Lorett has finally snapped. She refuses to be the obedient daughter any longer, and to prove it, she shoves her sister Rose to the ground and climbs on top of her. She starts yelling about how vicious and mean she is, while Rose stares back at her horrified. The next second, her father intervenes, separating the girls and throwing Lorett against the wall. He thinks she's being ungrateful. Considering she's an illegitimate child, he could have thrown her out on the street. I guess he's completely ignoring the fact that the illegitimate child come from parents. She didn't just appear from thin air, bro. That's your daughter right there. Like a spoilt little child, Rose asks her father to beat her up until she loses consciousness, and he accepts. But Lorett isn't going to go down without a fight. She bites down on his ankle as hard as she can, refusing to let go until she is kicked across the room. Damn, this is getting intense. After all that kicking and screaming, it's time for a little context. The man Lorett is supposed to marry is Duke Reinhardt, who was so powerful he was second only to the imperial family themselves. Originally, he was engaged to Rose, who fell in love with him at first sight and begged her father to make them a match. Then, after winning a war for the Empire, Duke Reinhardt was murdered by his captives. Instead of just annulling the marriage, Count Brumaire decided to send his other daughter so that they could receive the huge dowry that had been promised. What a cheapskate! So, despite all her fury and fighting spirit, Lorett is being sent to the Reinhardt estate to fulfill the bargain even though there's no longer a husband waiting for her. Though Duke Reinhardt was once rich, after his passing, people found evidence of him being a rebel. Now the only thing left in his name is a small property deep in the mountains. Lorett arrives to find it completely deserted, overgrown, and empty of any signs of life. You might think she'd be panicking, but actually, she's overjoyed. Finally, she is away from her family and has a home all to herself. The building itself is in good condition, but she has a lot of work to do if she wants to survive the winter. Meanwhile, back at the Brumaire estate, Rose is still mourning the death of her beloved Duke. Her parents remind her that in the eyes of the Empire, he is now a traitor. There's no reason to think about him any longer. But Rose can't forget him. She keeps going back to the night they met, when she first saw him at a party. She decided then and there that she wanted to marry him and ran straight to Daddy to make it happen. She's such a brat. Her mother, Lady Brumaire, has never been fond of Lorett, but she's glad that her husband's illegitimate child ended up being useful by keeping the honor of the Brumaire family and gaining them a lot of money. But her husband isn't quite so happy to hear Lorett being brought up over and over again, especially when his wife makes fun of her appearance. He flies into a rage and tells them both to shut up, slamming a fist on the table. Dishes, glasses, and food fly everywhere. A small shard from his wine glass cuts the lady's cheek, leaving a trail of blood in its wake. Okay, is it just me, or is everyone in this family super violent? What is with these people? Somehow, the Count decides this is all his wife's fault and tells her and Rose to get out. He always gets like this when Lorett is mentioned. Ever since she first laid eyes on her half-sister, Rose has hated her. She was jealous of her pale skin and shiny silver hair. Above all, she hated the idea that her father had another daughter, one who didn't look like any of them. Even though she was meant to be the older sister, she never acted like one. Instead of leaving him alone, Rose approaches her father. For her, this is a happy day. Lorett is finally gone and their family can go back to how they were before. Jeez, just how delusional is this girl? She tries to cheer her father up by saying Lorett is probably already dead. Not sure how that's supposed to make him feel better. She's a little twisted, isn't she? Unfortunately for Rose, Lorett is doing just fine on her own. She spent what little money was left by the Count on firewood, since most of the woodlands surrounding the villa are too damp to catch fire. It's times like this when her tragic childhood actually comes in handy for once. But even the smallest reminder of those dark times makes Lorett uncomfortable, so she busies herself with dinner instead. She stole a few matches and some spices from the Brums estate before they kicked her out, but all she has right now are potatoes, and there aren't a lot either. Any ordinary noble girl would be stuck in a situation like this, but Lorett has street smarts from her time as a commoner and starts searching the house for valuable pieces of furniture to sell. The staff took all the expensive silverware, but there's a lot left that will probably keep her afloat until she can get a job. Things are really looking up for little Lorett. After appraising the furniture, she sits down to enjoy a delicious baked potato with a little sprinkling of salt and pepper. She's not doing so bad for a girl who's been left for dead in the mountains. She's already planning out the next few days, grateful to finally be somewhere warm and satisfied. When she was younger, she was starved and lived a difficult life. As if that wasn't bad enough, her mother abandoned her when she was 8, leaving her with Count Brums, the father she'd never met. At first, he was kind to her. He accepted her as part of the family, and for a while, people went along with it. But Rose never saw her as one of them and often beat her, locking her in her room and refusing to let her join the family for dinner. Ugh, this girl just gets worse and worse. So even though she became a noble, Lorett is happier and better fed now than she has ever been before. She has her own house, some food and tea, and hopefully soon she'll be able to get a job. The first few weeks pass smoothly. The villagers are very kind and take good care of her. They even gave her some seeds to plant before the winter hits. By now, she has stocked a small supply of cooking ingredients and knickknacks. The house isn't totally clean yet, but honestly, what would you prioritize, cleaning or food? I know I'd be the same in her position. She got some tips and good quality beef from the townspeople, so Lorett starts making a delicious stew to warm her up. But just as she's adding the pepper, there's a sudden bang from outside. Wait, is someone at the door? The door to her abandoned villa in the mountains? That's a little spooky. Lorett pokes her head into the hallway, trying to tell if anyone is at the door. Maybe it was a passing animal or a bird that fell from the sky. But if it is a bird, then she should save it. At least, that's what Lorett thinks. There's no way you'd ever catch me risking my life to save some pigeon. Nervously, she eases open the door to find not a bird, but a hulking man in black armor on her doorstep. And he's bleeding. Heavily. He calls her Nanny and mumbles that he didn't do it before collapsing on Lorett. What the heck is going on? Somehow, she manages to get him inside and wrapped in some blankets before the fire, which is pretty impressive considering he's about 3 times her size. Of course, she recognized him at once. This is Duke Reinhardt, the supposedly dead Duke Reinhardt who is now a traitor of the Empire. Is it just me, or did anyone else kind of see that coming? But Lorett isn't bothered about his reputation. The only thing she cares about is cleaning his wounds, keeping him warm, and breaking his fever. He seems to be in a lot of pain. She's not sure if he'll last the night. While watching him rest, she thinks about how strange it is that this wounded soldier is her husband, and wonders if she will regret helping him. Even so, she doesn't want him to die. She doesn't need any more chores, and disposing of a body is a pretty big one. Meanwhile, the Duke is reliving his memories from the end of the war. They had just gained a victory and were about to head home. Then, one of the Duke's men, a soldier named Bartholte, rushed up and stabbed him. The only explanation he gives is a warning that Reinhardt made an enemy of the imperial family, and this is the consequence. The Duke suddenly comes to his senses with a gasp, sitting upright in the abandoned villa. He recognizes the location, but not the girl asleep on his legs. When he first saw the white hair, he thought she was an old lady. That must be why he called her Nanny at the door. Lorett wakes up just as suddenly as he did. There's about 3 seconds of awkward eye contact before she says it's a relief her favorite chair didn't end up as his final resting place. Then she asks if he likes stew, as if the whole situation is perfectly normal and not something out of a straight-up nightmare. The Duke is taken aback by her laid-back attitude, but he can't do much to stop her as she begins to cook. Minutes later, a delicious bowl of stew is brought to his chair. That's pretty top-quality service if you ask me. The Duke is surprised and calls her Miss, but Lorett corrects him. She is married after all. Her injured soldier doesn't take the hint. he doesn't have much to say, so the vibe gets steadily more awkward until Lorett fetches a bucket of water to clean his stomach wound with. She warns him not to hold back. He can scream all he wants because this is definitely going to hurt. The wound is several weeks old, but it hasn't healed well. The Duke suspects the sword has something special, like a poison maybe, which is why he ended up so frail and weak. Otherwise, a slash to the stomach would have been no big deal, apparently. Lorett calmly washes the wound and holds his hand the whole time. Not in a cute way, but so that he doesn't clench his fist and accidentally hurt himself. She wraps him up in bandages, apologizing that there are no fresh clothes for him to change into. At this point, the Duke is grateful, but kind of suspicious. Like, why is this random lady squatting in his house? Lorett explains that she recently became the Lady Reinhardt, which means this villa now belongs to her. Finally, everything clicks into place. The Duke barely remembers signing the marriage agreement and is even less sure about the woman he agreed to marry. Her name was Rose, but he didn't remember seeing her face. Ouch! Rose thought that they would be sweethearts, but it turns out he didn't even know who she was. Serves her right, I guess. The Duke points out that Lorett just helped a traitor, but she doesn't really care. At this point, that's the least of her worries. He finds her kind of odd, but the Duke is strangely amused by his new wife. So he settles back, allowing her to tuck him in while he rests a while longer. It will be quite some time until he's healed after all. For now, he just has to sleep and hope for the best. While he's resting the next day, the first snow arrives. Lorett is a little disappointed that she won't be able to plant her seedlings, but keeps her focus on her injured husband. By the way, does anyone think it's kind of crazy how quickly she's adjusted to all of this? Like, a man who's supposed to be dead shows up at her door and she just rolls with it? Kind of iconic, really. She brews him tea and brings it to his bedroom. The Duke claims his fever has improved, but one touch of his forehead proves he's a liar. She tells him not to bother trying to hide the truth and makes him sit up to drink the tea. She went to the market especially to get tea leaves which help to lower fevers and added milk for nutritional value. What a sweet wife she is. The Duke thinks the same and thanks her for the effort. Lorett claims it was no trouble, even though it clearly was, and opens the window to get some fresh air in. The snow reminds the Duke of his childhood years where he would come to this villa for the holidays. His mother was frail and often retreated to the villa when she was sick, so he spent a lot of time there growing up, watching the snowfall with her. After she passed away, he never set foot in the villa again. He sent the staff away, hoping that the house would eventually crumble and disappear. It's a good thing it didn't, otherwise he wouldn't have had anywhere to come after the betrayal. Speaking of which, the Duke wants to tell Lorett the truth, that he's not really a traitor. He tries to get up, but ends up collapsing beside the bed instead. While passed out, the Duke, whose name is Ian, once again returns to his childhood, remembering his mother's arrival one winter at the villa. He was delighted to see her, and while they were walking the corridors upstairs, he caught sight of a girl with silver hair passing by. He couldn't place her, but for some reason he knew that woman was his wife. Kind of a strange thought for a 10-year-old to have. Is he delirious from the fever? Pushing her out of his mind, he sits down to lunch with his mother. She can't eat much as she's really very sick and heads upstairs to rest. Ian wants to get her favorite rocking chair for her, but someone else was sitting in it. Or that's what it looked like anyway. When the lady turns around, it's his mother. He is worried about her health, as are pretty much all of the staff in the mansion, but she assures him she'll be around for many years to come. It's a shame she couldn't keep her promise. When Ian wakes up, it's Lorett and not his mother by his side. His fever went up again during the night, so she tells him not to try and speak, dabbing at his sweat with a cool towel. The Duke can't help but be reminded of his family, the way she takes care of him so sweetly. But since Lorett has married into the Reinhardt name, isn't she technically family now too? It's kinda cute when you think about it. Fortunately, Ian turns a corner after that night. You see, to be a swordmaster in this empire, one has to be able to control their mana. And controlling your mana gives you special powers, including the ability to heal much faster than the average person. So once the fever is broken, he can recover at a normal rate. A week after his arrival, his condition has already improved a lot. He's starting to eat again, so Lorett makes a vegetable soup to speed his recovery. Ian makes it out of bed to join her in the kitchen, which comes as quite a shock to his wife/nurse. He was drawn by the smell of her cooking and even offers to help out. So Lorett pokes him right in his wound, just to humble him a little bit. They sit down to eat together and Ian finishes everything. Who knew she had such a talent for cooking? Ian wants to show his appreciation, but as we've already seen, he's not the best at using his words. Suddenly, he gets the idea to wash up the dishes, but one stern look from Lorett makes him sit right back down again. She cleans up instead, leaving him alone to wonder how he can be more of a help to her. The only thing he can think of is a silver necklace with a stunning blue vial. It's not clear how, but the Duke intends to clear his name using that necklace. Maybe it's proof of his innocence? When Lorett returns, he asks to talk to her. He warns her that what he's about to say may sound a little crazy, and hesitates a while. After a moment, he tells her the truth, that he was framed. He's not really a traitor, although Lorett had already guessed that by now. She doesn't question him, not even for a second. She just asks if it was the imperial family who did it. Our girl is one smart cookie. But like any reasonable woman, she does ask for proof. Ian breaks out his necklace. It turns out the liquid in that little vial is purified dragon tears. Yes, that's right. Dragons exist in this universe. Although they are few and far between, their territory is off limits to humans. Normally, there's no interaction between dragons and humans, but every now and again, a dragon runs rampant and comes down to the human world to attack. That's why swordmasters are so important. They are the front line of defense between humans and the rogue dragons who run wild. And when a dragon is killed, they're often harvested for their magical properties, the rarest of which are their tears. Anyone who drinks them is compelled to tell the truth. It's a family treasure that has been handed down through the Reinhardts for generations. Just before he went off to war, the Crown Prince warned Ian to take it with him. He must have known what was coming and wanted to do something, even something small for the Duke who was about to be murdered. With the vial at his side, Ian has some hope. Better yet, he has a plan. A few hundred years ago, the Iasa Empire ran into some trouble with their noble class. Since the empire is formed of various smaller factions, there was lots of tension between the aristocracy of the previous nations. In an attempt to unify these factions, the empire set several laws for social interaction. One of which is that for the imperial party, held on National Foundation Day, all families above the rank of Count have to be invited. That means in spring, when the Foundation Day comes around, Lorett, like all the other nobles, will receive an invitation. On that day, Ian plans to sneak into the ball and prove his innocence in front of everyone using the dragon tears. Of course, this plan is insanely risky, and it relies heavily on the Crown Prince supporting him if he does actually manage to get inside the palace in one piece. And before he does any of that, he will need to fully recover from his injuries. That's going to take some time. Lorett asks if he's planning to go in alone, taking her invitation. That is what he had in mind, since he doesn't want her to be connected to him if anything goes wrong. But actually, he would have a much higher chance of success if she came along with him. Of course, she has plenty of reasons not to go. For one thing, Rose will definitely be there, and she isn't in a hurry to have a family reunion anytime soon. For another, there's the whole issue of her identity. The Duke still assumes that she is Rose, not Lorett, and if things go well and his name is cleared, there's a chance she'll be swapped out for her bratty sister who was so in love with Ian in the first place. So why would she want to help him regain his title? Lorett acts a little cold towards him after that, but Ian can't understand why. A little later, she heads out to get some water, and he offers to do it for her. His health is gradually improving, but Lorett is too good of a nurse to let an injured patient head out into the snow without a coat. Honestly, what is he thinking? She runs out by herself, hoping to get far enough that he can't follow her, but let's just say Lorett is not a runner or a track star, and it doesn't take long for Ian to catch up. He follows quietly from behind, just wanting to keep an eye on her and make sure she's safe. It takes literally seconds before she hears his footsteps on the snow and turns around. Good job, Swordmaster. Lorett is clearly annoyed, but they've come too far to send him back alone. When they reach the stream, she fills up her bucket and starts heading back, but the Duke is nowhere to be found. Lorett starts to panic. Did he fall in the stream when she wasn't looking? Actually, no. He just caught a fish with his bare hands. No idea how he did that. Dukes are just built different, I guess. He tries to take the bucket of water as well, but Lorett doesn't want to hand it over. It's so full that they both start to shake, and suddenly it spills all over Ian. Oh no, he just got over a fever and now he's going to have a whole new one. Lorett rushes him back to the villa and apologizes for getting him ill again. Ian doesn't seem to mind, but he is a little sniffly. To help him regain some strength, she suggests they cook the fish over the fire and get him some food. While she's talking, the Duke suddenly realizes that they are no longer using titles, but they aren't using their first names either. He asks if they can call each other by their names. They are married after all. It's the least they can do. He even tries to warm up the atmosphere by calling her dear at the end. What a cutie! But Lorett isn't so eager to get on a first-name basis. That would mean revealing her true identity, explaining her illegitimate birth. It's not exactly a comfortable topic. She doesn't respond, and the Duke takes a step towards her, asking what's wrong. He almost calls her Rose, but she shouts suddenly, protesting the name. In her panic, she trips on the carpet and falls against the wall. Ian wants to help her, but Lorett tells him not to. She's pretty aggressive, actually. Even just hearing her sister's name feels like torment. How much longer will she be haunted by that girl? Lorett tries to act normal. Well, as normal as anyone could after having a mental breakdown at the sound of their own name. She moves to the kitchen to prepare dinner, leaving Ian confused. He wants to come with her in case she trips again, but his wife slaps his hand away and tells him to go away. Well, if he didn't think anything was up before, he definitely will now. Why is she so bad at acting? Dazed and a little hurt, Ian watches her walk away, wondering what he did wrong. Is it because he's a traitor and she doesn't want to get too friendly with him? Uncertain, Ian tells her he will come and find her once she's calmed down. Lorett doesn't respond. When she gets to the kitchen, she slumps against the wall, frustrated with herself. After months of freedom and hardly even thinking about her horrible family, it's not nice to hear their names again. Especially as a reminder that everything she has is supposed to be Rose's. In a flashback, we get to see Lorett's perspective of her first meeting with Rose, when they were only 9 and 8 years old. From the moment they met, she knew Rose was different. She had grown up surrounded by love and wealth, and never once looked at Lorett as a sister. Although she understood why Rose hated her, the injustice stung poor little Lorett. It was her father who had the affair. Why should she suffer the consequences? She tried to get closer to Rose and paid for it. She was falsely accused of stealing one of her sister's necklaces, earning her the hatred of her family, which began endless years of torment. Back in the present, Lorett has calmed down a little. Besides, there's no time to dwell on the past. It's the middle of winter and her husband has a cold. They need food and warm water before the sun goes down. She gets to action right away, but can't shake a little guilt for the way she reacted to Ian. For now, she decides to let him call her Rose, if that's what's best for both of them. At least that's what she thinks. Anyone else wondering why she doesn't just come clean? That way they could work together to find a way to clear his name and stayed married. Duh! Anyway, when Lorett finds Ian again, he seems tense. In the quiet, they can hear footsteps, a pair of them. The National Foundation Day is in spring, so there's no reason to deliver invitations at this time of year. But who else would have come all this way into the mountains? Someone knocks at the door, asking if anyone is inside. The most important thing is for Ian not to be caught. If anyone sees the shadow of a man inside, word will quickly spread to the Imperial family, and they'll send someone to investigate. Then they would really be in trouble. Lorett tells the Duke to hide, moving toward the door. She asks who is at the door, but the stranger won't say. They're surprised to hear that the house is actually occupied and ask to be let in, claiming they're from the government office. Well, that's not good. Lorett opens the door. The man is indeed in uniform and looks surprised to see a young lady standing before him. He explains that the latest imperial order requires a nationwide census report. The locals from the village told him about a girl who comes up and down the mountains, so he came to check it out. Whether it's for tax purposes or because this guy's just a sleaze, we don't know. But Lorett is cautious enough to start closing the door. She tells him that she lives alone, but the government officer catches the door. Apparently, he saw 2 sets of footprints coming up towards the cabin, so now he's suspicious. If only Ian wasn't such a stubborn gentleman, this wouldn't be a problem. Lorett quickly covers by claiming that a herbalist from the village came to visit. He's not quite convinced, so he stomps inside to make sure there's no one else around. Lorett is furious. As if it wasn't bad enough that he's intruding in her home, he even has the nerve to ask for tea. Ugh! The living room is clear, but just as they're about to enter the kitchen, they hear a loud crash. Lorett runs to the window to find Ian outside in the snow, clutching at his side. The officer is right behind her. The only thing she can think of is to pretend Ian is a cat. She grabs a knife from the block and screams at him, raising her knife and telling Ian to get out of her sight. Not bad. Now, where were these amazing acting skills when he called her Rose? Ian is not getting the hint, or maybe he just can't move. So Lorett pretends there's another cat outside and turns to the officer, still wielding the knife. By now, he's definitely no longer thinking she would be fun to mess around with. I mean, the girl looks clinically insane. So the officer leaves while Lorett screams threats at him from the doorway. I don't think he'll be coming back anytime soon. As soon as he's out of sight, Lorett closes the door and Ian climbs back inside. After her slightly deranged performance, things are a little awkward. All he can think to say is that she must really hate cats. Ironically, that's not true at all, but at least she fooled him. Lorett can feel her husband staring while she puts the knife away, and honestly, can you blame him? He probably thought she was going to throw a knife at him for a second back there. Thanks to their unexpected visitor, she missed the chance to talk to him about the whole Rose incident, so she tells him just to call her Rose from now on. She only got so upset before because she doesn't like her name, she says, and apologizes for overreacting. And that is technically true. Lorett is the name of a lowly goddess born from a relationship between the god of life and death and a fairy. She led a sinful life as a result of her low birth, and the stories say she died a sad death. Heck of a goddess to be named after. It suits an illegitimate child, of course, but there's no way anyone would like a name like that. Ian must have been able to sense the truth behind it. He promises not to call her Rose since she doesn't like it, and offers to prepare the dinner she had started. For a man who wields a sword on the battlefield, he's pretty good with a knife. And from his time at sea, he learned to cook pretty well with only limited ingredients. He even knows how to fillet. Seriously, this guy's the full package. I'm not sure who's a better cook, Lorett or the Duke, but by the time he's finished, there is a restaurant-quality meal waiting to be devoured. He helps Lorett into a seat and serves up. The fish was too small to make 2 servings, so he's given up his dinner for her sake. Aww. Even though he's going hungry, Ian seems happy with the look on her face when she tries his food. It's the first time in a long time that she's been cared for like this. In her first family, her mother abandoned her, and in the second one, she was abused. So even small gestures like cooking or asking how she likes the food mean a lot to Lorett. Maybe this third family could be the one that sticks. They spend the winter peacefully, and by the time spring arrives, the two of them have built a little life together. The cat who often visits is called Butterfly and seems very fond of Lorett. Actually, she kind of looks like Lorett. You know, if she was a cat. The first blades of grass are already poking through the snow, the first sign of real life that they've seen in quite some time. Spring is finally here, which means the National Foundation Day is getting closer and closer. Lorett arrives on their front porch and sits down beside Ian, who starts braiding her hair. Okay, what the heck? Where can I find a man who's going to feed my cat and braid my hair? He's literally an angel. He plucks a dandelion to show his wife, but Lorett isn't interested in anything she can't eat. Kind of relatable, honestly. The impending invitation arrives about a month before the Imperial Ball is due to be held. The messenger who delivers it calls her Duchess. Probably the first time she'd been addressed that way. It's even written on the invitation, Duchess Reinhardt. But is it Lorett or Rose that owns that name? Once the messenger has left, she hands the invitation over to the Duke. Finally, his plan is about to be put into action. It makes him think of his staff, all the wonderful people he cared for who worked under him. Although they were mostly shown mercy by the Imperial family, there's no way of knowing where they went, how they're doing. It's difficult for Ian to accept. Nowadays, the only person he can rely on is Lorett, who has also warmed up to him at last. Noticing his concern, she gives him a big hug. After all these weeks, she has also decided that she wishes to accompany him at the palace. Ian is shocked and more than a little annoyed. Although it would be certainly less suspicious if they arrived together, it would put Lorett in immense danger if things went wrong. Even if they didn't, she could still be branded as an ex-trader's wife. The Duke reminds her that if she was in danger, her whole family would also be in trouble. Of course, Lorett doesn't care one bit what happens to those guys, but she has other reasons for wanting to attend. After becoming his wife and the Duchess Reinhardt, she feels a sense of responsibility to his people. If they clear his name, those people will also be cleared of suspicion and might even get their jobs back. She also adds a load of excuses about wanting to be rich and famous again, which is clearly a lie. Ian knows her too well to believe that. He still refuses, so Lorett switches tactics and threatens him instead. If he fails and the soldiers come knocking at the mountain house, she declares that she will confess everything about how she helped a traitor and gave him the invitation. Then his grand protectiveness will be all for nothing, and Ian will be executed without a doubt. Lorett is stubborn, but Ian thinks she wouldn't go that far. At least, he hopes she wouldn't. Anyway, she doesn't need his permission to go. Her mind is made up. So the next step is securing a dress. They'll have to sell furniture to get even the cheapest of ball gowns, so Lorett makes a big deal about the difficulty of doing it all herself. Ian gives in, just as a pile of wooden planks, brooms, and buckets fall on top of her. He agrees to attend the ball together and even shows her the way to the attic, where there are a few ball gowns gathering dust. Ian opens a case full of dresses that used to belong to his mother. Lorett picks out a silver one made from woven dragon scales, gifted to the former Duchess when she received the Duke's proposal. Whoa, that's a pretty big deal for Ian to give it to her. Lorett falls in love with it at once. It's almost like it was made for her. Spring sets in, and before they know it, there's only 1 week left until the Imperial Ball. That means it's time to travel to the capital with the few possessions they have, hoping things will work out. They spent the last few weeks chopping up wood, selling their furniture to buy passage through the Empire, and hiding from the villagers. It's pretty impressive that after all this time, no one saw Ian. Let's just hope it all doesn't go to waste when he turns up at the palace. They find a carriage driver in town who will take them to the capital. The local ladies wave goodbye to Lorett as they prepare to board the carriage. Looks like she's made some friends in her time here. They arrive at their first checkpoint late at night. The plan is for them to show up to the ball together so that Ian can pass the checkpoint. Then Lorett will leave before he appears at the banquet hall and rush back to the villa, where she will be far away and hopefully out of reach of the Imperial guards. They've reached the city with a few days to spare. Oshira, a short distance from the capital, is a good place to hide with lots of merchants and travelers to fill the streets. Unfortunately, it's a popular stop-off point for people traveling to the ball, so the price for a room is crazy expensive. Seems like everyone had the same idea. They definitely don't have enough for 2 rooms, so Lorett gets them one small one to share, to the embarrassment of Ian. Oh, the classic one-room trope. This is going to be good. The room isn't so bad, but the bed is truly tiny. Lorett is just as uncomfortable as her husband, but she tries not to show it as they unpack their luggage. She invites Ian to wash up first, but by the time he gets back, she's already passed out on the bed. Uh-oh, as if things weren't awkward enough already. He covers her up with the blanket, smiling fondly at his wife as he scoots onto the bed beside her. What a gentleman. He didn't even think of taking the blanket for himself. While watching her sleep, he imagines a life they could have together if his name and titles were restored. He wants to give her the world. Holiday homes, jewels and gems, you name it. She cuddles closer in her sleep, giving Ian an excuse to wrap his arms around her. They're such cuties. A few days later, they arrive in the Imperial capital. Ian gets ready in his usual armor, since he's going to have to take out a few guards if things get dicey. Lorett, however, well, just look at her. Ian is totally speechless. He almost calls her a goddess before getting control of himself. Lorett is grateful, but now it's game time. They both know the plan. Now it's time to see if they can actually pull it off. Is anyone else really nervous? I'm honestly not sure how this is going to go. The Imperial Palace is just as grand as you'd expect, which makes the shabby carriage they arrive in that much more noticeable. The guards look suspicious, but when Lorett steps down from the carriage, they apologize at once. She hands over her invitation, revealing that she is the wife of the late traitor Duke Reinhardt. Although he looks down on her, the guard lets her pass. They're just about to head inside when he notices Ian and demands that he lower his hood. Thinking on her feet, Lorett claims that her partner is hiding severe burns and asks them to let him be. Of course, they're not just going to let a suspicious-looking person like this inside without seeing his face, so they remove his hood. Luckily, these two came prepared. Ian's face is covered with what looks like horrific burns, shocking the guard who backs away at once. He's really such a snob, this guy. He doesn't even want to touch the man in case he somehow gets infected. Right, because that's exactly how scars work. All the other guests are already discussing Lorett's dress. They have no idea how someone from a ruined family could look so glamorous, and how she had the gall to show up to the Imperial Palace in the first place. Lorett is annoyed, but she doesn't show any emotion as she and Ian climb to the banquet hall together. This is where things get serious. From now on, they must go their separate ways. Lorett wishes her husband good luck, and he promises to return to her in a few days if all goes well. I don't even want to think about what will happen if they don't. Ian disappears to prepare for his big entrance, while Lorett heads inside alone. She is announced to the entire ball, followed by dead silence. No one even bothers to approach her, but she tries to stay calm, walking through the crowd to the sound of whispers. Girl, don't worry, they're just jealous of your dress. Of course, there's one person who just couldn't leave her alone, even if she wanted to. It takes about 2 minutes for Rose to walk up to her. She's in total shock. She doesn't even believe this is her sister. Of course, Lorett knew she would probably run into Rose tonight, but that doesn't make her any more prepared. Rose is surprised she hasn't starved to death already, and even more surprised to see her in such a glamorous dress. She looks like she's about to throw a punch, but luckily for Lorett, everyone is watching them. And actually, she's kind of enjoying this. They lived together for so many years, but this is the first time Rose has actually seemed jealous. She steps closer to Lorett, warning her that just because she wears a fancy dress and has a title doesn't make her a noble. Girl, can you hear yourself? That's exactly what makes someone a noble. Rose gives her a smirk, excited to see how long she can keep up her facade in front of the vicious upper class. Then she rudely bumps into her and walks off. What a child! Although, she's right about one thing. You should never underestimate the arrogance of noble society. Lorett tries to recover herself, a little concerned. She expected some kind of counterattack, but given the setting, Rose is pretty limited in how she can get revenge. So Lorett spends the rest of the evening watching her from a distance, sipping her champagne and waiting for Ian's entrance. The time is approaching, but there's no sign of him yet. She can't afford to stand around and wait. Lorett needs to leave before he is spotted so that there can be no connection between them. She steps out into the hallway, walking past all the married couples still trickling in. The atmosphere is bright and lighthearted, but Lorett is tense as she descends the steps alone. It shouldn't feel strange. She's always been alone, but for some reason now, after spending the winter with Ian, she feels an intense sense of loneliness. She stops on the steps, reminding herself that she doesn't belong in a place like this. Oh no, it seems like Rose has really gotten into her head. Shaking off her doubts, Lorett heads towards a carriage, but just as she steps onto the street, a pair of guards rush forward and capture her, covering her head with a sack. Lorett is terrified. She can hardly breathe. They're squeezing her neck so tightly that she starts to cough. There's only one person who would dare to do such a thing in the middle of the Imperial City. Rose. We knew she wouldn't let it go, but to go this far? She's totally insane. Lorett tries to wriggle, but her strength is starting to fade. Lorett wakes up to the sound of voices and the sight of a familiar dress. Rose is spinning an outrageous tale to the guards, claiming that Lorett hit her in the head and even knocked out a couple of her teeth. I guess that's how she convinced them to capture her, by pretending she's a threat to society. This girl really has no limits. Once they're gone, she smirks at Lorett, who is on her knees in rags. I guess she really couldn't stand seeing her in that dress. It's only been 30 minutes since she was knocked out. That also means that Ian hasn't made his appearance just yet. They're back at the Brums mansion, a place Lorett probably never wanted to return to for the rest of her life. Rose encourages her to look around the house and warns her not to attempt any kind of escape. She has a full-on villainous monologue about how no one wants Lorett around, how she wishes she were never born, blah blah blah. When will Rose come out with some original material? It's getting really tired. Unfortunately, it still gets to Lorett. She didn't want to be born either, and definitely wouldn't have picked this life if she had the choice. In that case, says Rose, she should try her best to die. Whoa, that's way harsh. Hearing that snaps Lorett out of her funk. How dare her sister say such things with that little smirk on her face? She's talking to a duchess. She should really have some more manners. But Rose doesn't care. She summons a maid to come and slap her for talking back. Once, twice, again, until Rose is satisfied. Is everyone in this house a psychopath? These people are truly evil. Rose sends the maid away, saying what a shame it is that they ended up hating each other. Rightfully, Lorett tells her there's nothing shameful about it. They only ended up this way because Rose is a meanie and her family is full of snakes and devils. Yes, you see, even a few slaps won't take Lorett down. She even asks Rose if she still trembles in front of her dad, using her sister to exercise the power she lacks in her own family. Was she secretly jealous when Lorett got her freedom? After all, she's left this nightmare mansion. Rose is the one still stuck in it. Furious, Rose grabs the teapot and raises it, ready to smash it into her sister's head. Lorett tenses for the blow, but she restrains herself, gently placing it back down with a sigh. Because she has far worse revenge in mind. When Lorett returns to the Reinhardt Duchy, she won't be going back to that villa. She'll be sent to work on the land, no better than an ordinary peasant. Before Lorett even has time to process what she just said, Rose summons the knights who grab her at once. As if that wasn't bad enough, she lets one of the guards pick what punishment to give her. And the crazy man says they should dislocate her shoulder. Seriously? What is wrong with these people? Suddenly, a maid rushes into the room, interrupting their sick little torture session. She announces that the Duke of Reinhardt has appeared at the Imperial Palace and everyone is in an uproar. Rose is too stunned to speak. She assumes they have all apprehended the traitor, but apparently, that's not the case. She tells her the guests are gathered on the first floor and suggests she go to investigate herself. Rose walks out the door, and for a minute, it looks like she might have forgotten about Lorett. But then her horrible face pops back into view. She tells the guards to dislocate her shoulder and send her to the carriage waiting at the back door. It seems now that the Duke is back on the scene, she has even more reason to make sure Lorett stays out of her way. She's still got her heart set on being Duchess Reinhardt. At least she orders a maid to accompany them so that the guards don't do anything even more disgusting on the way. She walks off, grinning ear to ear at the idea of seeing the Duke, leaving Lorett to face her fate. As soon as they are alone, the guard gets his revenge for all the trouble she caused earlier and snaps her shoulder out of place. Ugh, I can't watch. This is too horrible. Rose, who is standing just outside, smiles at the sound of her sister's agony. Satisfied, she heads to the main lobby where her parents are discussing the Duke's appearance. They left the ball early, so they didn't see what happened, but they can confirm that it's not just a rumor. He really is alive. Now, we get to see Ian's experience of the ball from the moment he and Lorett parted ways. His first job was to reduce the number of soldiers at the entrance of the palace to make their escape a little smoother. He had all the same thoughts as Lorett while walking through the palace alone, surprised to miss her company and already wishing they could both be back at their dusty old villa, separated from society and their many enemies. It's for Lorett that he decides to focus so hard, determined to earn back his title and give her a good life. Finally, he gets a chance to show off his insane skills, making short work of the guards deep in the palace before moving on to the next area. Just as it's time for the imperial family to enter the ball, he approaches the banquet hall, where he is stopped by an attendant. Of course, given Ian's strength, he can't really do much but stand and watch as the Duke enters just in time to catch the crown prince. The guards are in an uproar as he walks across the hall, but the prince isn't confused. He knows exactly who is approaching. In fact, he's been expecting him for quite some time, but he's totally frozen. There's nothing he can do to help, so he just stands and watches as the guards surround him, warning Ian not to move. The Empress appears next, somewhat amused by the bravery of a potential attacker to just walk straight into the Imperial Palace. She notices at once that her son is acting strange and tells him sternly to step back. She orders the guards to seize the intruder. The first step forward is Bartholté, the man who stabbed him all those months ago. It looks like he got a cushy promotion to the palace for betraying his own commander. What a snake! Ian gives a little chuckle and then draws his sword. He rushes forward, stunning Bartholté, who is almost too slow to block the first blow. He can tell that this attacker is no ordinary intruder, but a man with such swordsmanship should be able to identify him, so why is he attacking so mercilessly? He has real trouble keeping up as Ian attacks again and again and eventually lands a dagger against his neck. It's at that moment that Bartholté realizes who this stranger must be. He drops to his knees, disarmed, with Ian's dagger pointed straight at his face as the guests watch on in shock. Bartholté acknowledges him at last, addressing him as captain. Ian just asks why. Why would he betray his commander? But isn't it obvious? He was offered a chance to get rich and closer to the throne. Why would he say no? Well, because of loyalty, or dignity, or, I don't know, maybe a moral compass? Anyway, clearly that wasn't important to Bartholté, who is lucky to be spared by Ian. He walks away from his defeated opponent, telling the guests there's no need to be afraid. He lowers his hood, removes his cape, and pulls off his prosthetic burn scar. The guests and imperial family recognize him at once. He bows to them, apologizing for returning from the battlefield so late. The queen looks horrified, which is understandable since it was her who had him framed and left for dead in the first place. Surprise, Your Majesty! You failed miserably. She put in so much effort to make sure he died, and even if he didn't, she worked tirelessly to ensure that he was framed beyond a doubt. So how could he walk back into the palace so brazenly? She starts to smile. He's still a traitor as far as the imperial family are concerned. This time, it will be easy to get rid of him. Ian announces to the hall that he was falsely accused and swears on all his ancestors that he has never committed treason. The Empress struggles to hide her smile and asks how she can believe such a thing. That's when Ian pulls out the dragon tears. He asks to be interrogated, promising to reveal the truth of this whole mess. The Empress starts to shake. The guests are already whispering about the Duke and how he must be innocent, and if that's the case, then the imperial family has really, truly messed up. The Crown Prince tries to calm his mother, but she's already spiraling. The only thing she can think to do is to break the vial. She's just reaching out to grab it when the Crown Prince takes her hand. He takes it from there, asking if the dragon's tears are authentic. He reminds the Duke that those of the imperial family have dragon's blood running through their veins, which means that he can confirm whether it's real or not. The Duke stands his ground and offers the tears up for the prince to confirm. He pours out a drop into the prince's hand, where it turns gold like fire. Well, at least he was able to help in that small way. With the dragon's tears proven to be real, he asks Ian to drink them, declaring that he will conduct the interrogation personally, right here and now. 18 questions are asked in front of the entire nobility. Ian's innocence is proven and his name is cleared. The news spreads through the capital like wildfire. The plan went as well as it possibly could. At least, they did for the Duke. The Crown Prince takes him aside to apologize that they can't do much more than that. The Empress is already suspicious about his involvement and refuses to execute Bartholdi. So this is the best it's going to get. After leaving the banquet hall, the Duke is approached by the remaining knights from his squad, who immediately came to greet and bow to him. His second in command, Count Rose Requila, is the one he's most pleased to see. They were all waiting for him, trusting that their Duke would return safe and sound. They're so happy that the knights start to cry. No, that's adorable. Requila offers to have a carriage taken back to the Reinhardt estate, but first, there's someone he needs to pick up. He's about to head off when a young girl with ginger hair approaches. She knows who he intends to find. Actually, she witnessed Lorett being kidnapped in front of the palace earlier and found out that she was the illegitimate daughter of Count Brumaire. But she thinks that the Duke's wife is Rose, so she tells him that she has returned to the Brumaire family mansion. So Ian heads over at once. When Count Brumaire hears that the Duke is coming to visit, he is perplexed. The only reason he can think of is that the Duke wants revenge for the insult of sending their illegitimate daughter instead of their firstborn. He starts to panic, and when the Duke arrives, he and his wife are clearly nervous. They just heard the news that he was falsely accused and apologize for not being able to assist him sooner. They ask if he came to take his wife and confirm that she's upstairs getting ready. She offers to show the Duke around the mansion, and he accepts. The whole situation is a little strange and a lot awkward, but everyone is too scared to offend the Duke, so they don't ask him any questions. And since Lorett said her name was Rose, he has no reason to question them either. Of course, when the real Rose appears, the Duke is stunned. He introduces himself and asks for her name, clearly thinking there's been a mix-up. She introduces herself as Rose Reinhardt, which is so gross. She thinks he's obsessed with her, that he must have fell in love at some previous ball and come right away to claim his bride. She sets down a tray of tea while Ian asks after the girl with silver hair and blue eyes. That's when Rose's heart stops dead. When did he meet Laritte? She tells him her real name and says that that girl is her sister. Count Requila tells the story of how she nursed him back to health at the villa, and Rose lets it slip that she's the illegitimate daughter. Suddenly, it all makes sense. The strange dislike of her name, how she wouldn't let him get close to her. It's because she didn't want him to find out the truth. Well, now he knows. I can't wait to see how he reacts when he finds out the real Rose just broke her shoulder and sent her off to work on a farm. The Duke already has a good idea of how she was treated in this house. Her own sister just called her illegitimate, and she was named after an evil and promiscuous goddess. So I think that makes things pretty clear. Rose apologizes for switching the brides and promises to do her best as the new Duchess. You might think they would refuse at once, but Requila suggests they take this one instead. After all, the Duke needs a legitimate bride in order to continue his family name. While they are talking, the Duke is getting angrier and angrier. He slams his fist against the cabinet and tells them both to shut up. He asks where Lorett is, but Rose can't understand why he's still looking for her. She's clearly not getting it, so the Duke doesn't bother to explain. He just walks away, slamming the door open and calling for his wife. Rose tells him that she's gone. She's been sent off to their estate. The Duke grabs her, demanding to know when they left and how far it takes to get there. Once he has the information, he tries to leave. Rose stops him on the steps, asking why he wants Lorett when his real wife is here. The Duke just laughs. It was them who sent Lorett in the first place, so she's the real wife. He leaves Rose slumped on the ground, slowly losing her mind. After everything she has done to ruin Lorett's life, she still won the Duke. Furious, Rose crashes a vase of flowers onto the floor. Her father appears and calls her a maniac, which, he's not wrong. but then he goes on about how useless and crazy she is and tells her to calm down, which obviously just makes things worse. Requilla follows the Duke as he storms out of the Brumaire house, asking why he's so determined to take an illegitimate child as his bride. Ian seems really surprised that his captain is resisting so much. After all, this is the woman who saved his life. But Count Requilla is pretty stuck in her old-fashioned mindset. She is worried that if the Duke marries someone of low birth, all the future generations of his family will be followed by rumor and always disrespected. Which is a good point, but still, can't this soldier see that he's in love? The Duke isn't in the mood to argue and tells the Count that if she hates it so much, she's welcome to leave his service and find a position elsewhere. And without another word, he climbs on his horse and starts heading for the gate. Damn, this man is literally pure hero material! After a slightly confusing argument with herself, Requilla agrees to follow him from behind with the wagon. Let's be honest, we all knew she was going to end up giving in anyways. Meanwhile, poor Lorett feels like she's gone back to the past, sitting in the freezing cold carriage while the guards stop to rest for the night. They just left her outside like she's some kind of animal. A boy passes selling papers detailing the Duke's return from the dead. Fortunately, Lorett still has a few coins on her and is able to buy one. She's relieved to find out that everything went well at the palace and also discovers his first name, Ian. That's right, I forgot that she still didn't even know his name. She can only guess at what happened after the ball. Her thoughts start to spiral, wondering if Ian abandoned her after finding out her illegitimate birth. Oh, this poor girl, she has no idea what's going on. The carriage soon starts moving again. Once they leave the capital, the roads become rougher, making all Lorett's injuries act up and disorienting her. She's about to pass out when the carriage jolts violently. Could it be? Has the Duke caught up to come and save her? The door opens to reveal Ian, standing like the gorgeous, majestic hero that he is. Took him long enough. For the first time, they get to call each other by their real names. And then Ian starts yelling at her for disappearing and getting herself beat up. What? Like it was a choice? At first, Lorett can't understand what's happened. She was totally convinced that if he met Rose, he would take her instead. And not only has he refused her sister, but he came all this way to save her, an illegitimate child. She starts crying, and the Duke softens a little. He admits that if he had only met Rose, he might have taken her on and just accepted the marriage. But now that he's met Lorett, he couldn't possibly let her go. This guy has a funny way of showing affection. Maybe it's just me, but I wouldn't exactly be over the moon if I heard that. I guess what he means is that she nursed him back to health, and after all those months together alone in the mountains, he doesn't want anyone else. Right, that's more like it. During this very romantic confession, Lorett winces from the pain of her shoulder. Ian takes one glance and realizes the wound is more serious than it looks. If she doesn't want it to worsen, the Duke needs to reset the bone, like right now. He warns her that it's probably going to hurt a little. More like a lot. Somewhere between the agony of her injuries and the exhaustion of confronting her sister again, Lorett's sanity seems to be slipping. Instead of saying, "Go ahead, it's okay," she yells out that she's not okay and this pain is unbearable. And after everything she's been through, it's no wonder. You can understand why she's sick of pretending to be strong after all this time. She starts shaking while poor Ian kind of just sits there not knowing how to comfort her. She just needed to let it out a little and reassures him that she's all right. He tells her to take her time, but Lorett is ready. Besides, they can't afford to wait any longer. He gently pulls her closer and instructs her to bite down and focus on her breathing. Then he sharply yanks the bone back into place. It's painful for a moment, but then she relaxes into his arms. The last thing she says before she faints is that she lost the dress. Don't worry, she's okay. Probably the shock of relocating her shoulder finally tipped her over the edge. Seeing his wife so broken and exhausted only makes the Duke more furious at the Brumaire family. He carries Lorett out of the carriage in his arms. Count Requilla is ready and waiting, but come on, a man like the Duke isn't going to entrust his wife to anyone else while she's in this state. He gently places her in the carriage they brought, lending her his jacket and ordering the Count to sit inside with them, which basically puts her in a prime position to watch the Duke caring gently for his wife. Requilla has never seen him act like this with anyone before, so she's a little stunned. But at least now she's sure that Lorett is the right person for him, regardless of her birth. She asks the Duke straight up if he has feelings for her, which you might think is an easy question to answer. Apparently, Ian is the king of repressing his feelings because instead he just says this is a token of his gratitude. This man isn't fooling anybody. Even Requila knows that's not the full story, but Ian just brushes it off by saying it's only natural that they have some feelings after spending the winter alone together. Okay, buddy, take your time. I just hope when the moment comes for him to confess to Lorett, he doesn't bottle it like this. He suddenly announces that he's tired after riding a horse and suggests that they all take a nap. What convenient timing. While he lays back with his wife wrapped in his arms, Requila wonders what future hardships await them both. It's clear that the Duke will have a very difficult time if he accepts Lorett publicly as his wife, and obviously her family is still out to get her. But the Duke is nothing if not stubborn. The best thing for Requila to do now is support him and hope that they can weather whatever storm comes next. Before his disappearance, Duke Reinhardt was known to rule over a very fertile land with several very profitable mines, located just southeast of the capital. Because of his wealth and good looks, rumors about his return began to spread very quickly. But you wouldn't know it by the state of the duchy when Ian and Requila arrived the next afternoon. The grounds are still grand and gorgeous, but the gate has started to rust from neglect, and it looks like there's no one home. It's a little sad for Ian, who was hoping to return to the faces of his staff who were always so loving and loyal. Fortunately, Requila has the clever idea to send some servants from her own family to clean up the main building before they arrived. But that doesn't mean Ian isn't worried about his own people. Because of his dishonorable status, they probably couldn't have found a job, so it's likely that many would have struggled or even starved to death. Despite that, Ian is determined to find the survivors and bring them back to the estate. Lucky for him, the first one presents herself as soon as he opens the door. The very youngest of his servants is so shocked to see her master that she calls out, drawing the attention of a whole army of staff who come running to welcome their master home. Looks like they didn't abandon him after all. Have they really been taking care of this place the whole time, even though they thought he was executed and a traitor? Talk about loyalty. Two of the maids immediately tackle Requila, and soon everyone is crying. The only person managing to keep it together is Ian's old nanny. She's the person he wanted to see the most, but he didn't expect her to be standing at the door when he arrived. The servants explain how they all stuck together through the last few months, living in each other's homes and looking out for each other. Ian was expecting to come back to a stark reality, but it sounds like they were doing just fine without him. One of his knights even fell in love with the youngest maid and got married. So when they heard the news that the Duke might be returning, they rushed back to the mansion just in case the rumors were true. Isn't that sweet? It's a good moment for the Duke to remember his real motivation. Not revenge, but taking care of his people. The maids soon noticed Lorett. Well, it would be hard not to, since he literally carried her in bridal style. It's clear that she's exhausted and injured, so the servants rush her upstairs to change her clothes and get her in bed. 2 days later, Lorett is still totally passed out. The nanny comes in to find the Duke sitting by her bedside, looking more worried than a nervous mother. She assures him that according to the doctor, she'll wake up sometime today, so there's no need to spend all his time sitting here watching her sleep. It's been a while since someone has spoken to Ian like a child, but let's be honest, knowing his personality, he could do with being taken down a few pegs. The nanny firmly tells him to get back to work. It's not like he doesn't have anything to do. Now that the duchy is back up and running, there's an endless list of tasks to complete. In the last few days, carriages have been constantly coming and going through the mansion, bringing supplies and replenishment, returning heirlooms that were confiscated, and knights and servants who had been wandering elsewhere. Finally, the Duke has all the documents that the Crown Prince confiscated, and is also presented with an investigation report. What, you think he was going to sit back and let bygones be bygones with the Brums heirs? Not a chance! Ian has been compiling a list of eyewitnesses and testimonies who saw Lorett get kidnapped right in front of the palace. Obviously, no one said a thing at the time, but now that the Duke has been pardoned and Lorett is a legitimate Duchess, suddenly the nobles are very keen to get on his good side. When the Duke finally tracks down the guards responsible, they drop to their knees and beg for his forgiveness. Instead of just chopping their heads off like he wants to do, Ian gives them a chance to restore their honor. He calls in Theophilus Loranbel, the youngest member of the Knight's Order, and asks for his opinion. Theo also kinda wants to just end this here and now, but seeing as how Ian is being nice today, he suggests a duel. That way, the dishonored knights get a chance to prove themselves, and Theo gets a chance to take matters into his own hands. If you get what I'm saying. He volunteers himself for the task, secretly hoping he can finish these guys off. But since he's the youngest knight with the least amount of training, the kidnappers think they have a chance. When the Duke declares they only have to lay a scratch on Theo to win, the kidnappers accept. They fill out the appropriate paperwork, because apparently even knights have to sign on the dotted line when their lives are at stake. The big burly guy, whose name is James, steps forward first. Theo is acting so smug that James quickly gets riled up. But before he can even raise his sword, the kid has landed his first strike. I mean, come on! With an attitude like that, he was never going to be bad, was he? It seems like the Duke picked Theo for a reason. He seems to be using this very intense duel as practice, asking his fellow knights to critique his movements and rate his posture. Theo actually hasn't had much training, but he comes from a family with a long history of swordsmanship. And as the third son in the family, he must have picked up more than a few tricks from his elder brothers. Although he's still young, he's advancing at an impressive rate. He's especially good at predicting his opponent's moves, which must be why the Duke chose him of all his knights. Before he went into the ring, Ian told him to take as much time as he wants and make the kidnapper suffer. Theo doesn't need to be told twice. In a little while, both the Brumare knights are on the ground, bleeding from multiple wounds. Theo continues to tease them, pointing out how easy their task was. They just had to land one hit, and they couldn't even do that. The Duke orders the men to be tossed in a wagon along with the documents proving that they consented to the duel and sends them back to Count Brumare. He also throws in a letter which demands the marriage loan to be returned since the Brumares violated the contract. Ian has no interest in money. He just wants to cause that awful family as much damage as possible, and the easiest way to do that is by making them bankrupt. That'll do it all right. Just when it seems like everything has been neatly tied up, the nanny comes running in, clearly panicked, and says Lorett has gone missing. Now, I know what you're thinking. Did the Brumare family go so far as to kidnap their illegitimate daughter again? And the answer to that would be no. This is all a very simple misunderstanding. You see, a few hours ago, Lorett woke up. She was still so groggy and exhausted that the moment she stepped out of bed, she fell on the floor and went straight back to sleep. But obviously, when the maids came in, they only saw the empty bed and freaked out. In a few minutes, the whole mansion was in an uproar, searching for their new Duchess in every nook and cranny, just not the spot beside her bed. Ian is already considering the possibility of an inside job when he finally discovers his wife crumpled up in a big fluffy bundle on the floor. I guess from a distance she just looked like a pile of sheets or something. The Duke is a little embarrassed, so he sends everyone out except his nanny. She says he's treating her like a child, picking her up and carrying her around all the time. But what is he supposed to do? She's been out cold for like 3 days, and he doesn't want her to wake up on the floor. While Ian and his nanny are bickering about her care, Lorett slowly opens her eyes to find her husband smiling down at her. Aw, it's so romantic. The nanny interrupts their charming moment by clapping her hands and clicking her fingers, trying to bring Lorett back to her senses. After a stern word with the Duke, she grabs Lorett and takes her for a bath. Lorett is still a little dazed, as you would be if you woke up somewhere new after days of sleep. While listening to the nanny natter on, she slowly puts the pieces together about where they are and who this snappy old lady is. Lorett tries to get on her good side by cleaning up the water she splashed around, but for some reason, that makes the nanny even angrier. I guess the Duchess really isn't supposed to lift a finger in this house. After a slightly tense bathing session, Lorett is returned to her room in a lovely new dress, and clean and sparkling. The nanny whispers something angrily in the Duke's ear, while she just stands there awkwardly. She's so used to being yelled at and hit all the time, the idea that people are serving her for once is a little strange. Ian can tell she's not quite adjusted yet, so he offers to take her for a walk to get some fresh air. He asks Lorett how she's finding things so far, but she isn't sure how to answer. It still doesn't feel real. Everyone here treats her like a duchess, when she's never even been treated like a human. It's really sad if you think about it. The Duke takes her up to a balcony to watch the sunset, where she finally relaxes a little. Lorett calls him by name for the first time, making Ian blush. Ugh, this guy is just too cute. He even shoves his jacket on her to hide his embarrassment. But Lorett really isn't getting the message. She asks him why he's acting all weird, and even scooches up closer to get a good look at his face. Oh Lord, girl, have mercy! She seems to think he's acting weird because he doesn't want to be married to her, as if he thinks she's ugly or something. Ugh, if she only knew. The Duke points out that people don't just get ugly overnight. But when Lorett lived at home, she would be scolded in the morning for being pretty and beaten at night for being ugly, so... Ian is a little hurt that she thinks he would act like her horrible family, and tells her not to believe in such stupid lies. In time, he wants her to forget everything they said and did so that she can live happily with him. She is just about to respond when suddenly she slips and falls off the rooftop. While trying to grab her, Ian falls too. The two of them are plummeting towards the ground, but Ian grabs her and kicks off from the wall, somehow defying all of physics to land perfectly on his feet. Yeah, I think we just need to suspend our disbelief a bit for that one, guys. Completely ignoring the superhero acrobats her husband just did, Lorett then proceeds to have a small breakdown about her trauma from her days at the Brummeyer house. Which makes sense. I mean, that kind of thing doesn't go away quickly. But she does want to move on. It's difficult for her to face the truth. Now that she has someone by her side who knows her so well, they will be able to see all the little flaws her family picked on her for. She starts heading back toward the mansion and softens when the Duke gently calls her name and starts worrying again about her health. See, girl, you can relax now. There's a wonderful man by your side. In the evening, Nanny brings her dish after dish to encourage her recovery. After all, she hasn't eaten in 3 days. Lorett is surprised by how different the dynamics are in this house from what she's used to. Nanny keeps scolding the Duke, and he kind of just takes it, while the other servants are all bright and cheerful. It's like one big happy family. Speaking of family, or at least the little life they had in the mountains, Ian asks his wife what she thinks their cat is up to at the moment. Actually, he already sent someone to go pick him up and bring him back to the mansion. How adorable! He really wants her to be as comfortable as possible. After the literal banquet that the chef prepared, Lorett feels like her stomach is about to blow. But she can't rest yet. Nanny wants to introduce her to the rest of the household staff without Ian. Kitchen maids, butlers, and gardeners are all brought before her. They treat Lorett like the lady of the house because I guess she is now. 2 pretty young maids are assigned to take care of her personally and introduce themselves as Alice and Irene. And in case you're wondering, yes, they are twins. They're very complimentary about Lorett. In fact, they seem to be slightly obsessed with their new mistress already. She's not used to all this special treatment, so it's still a little weird for Lorett. Especially when the knights kneel down and basically swear their swords to her. I don't know about you guys, but I would love that. She hasn't had much formal training as a noble, so she doesn't know all the rules and rituals. But the knights seem to appreciate her more for being down to earth and informal. Their leader explains that many of the knights came from common backgrounds, which explains their behavior. Originally, they had a much larger contingent, and the majority of them were from noble families. But when Duke Reinhardt was charged with treason, the talented knights of noble origins were allowed to enter into the service of other families, while the commoners were left no choice but to stick beside their dishonored duke. It's possible those noble knights would want to return, but the situation is still fragile. Plus, one of them accidentally let slip that many of the nobles have not yet returned because they heard about Lorett's background. Yikes. Way to make a good first impression, guys. Irene and Alice quickly hurry Lorett back to her room, where they tuck her into bed and bid her goodnight. After a long day of introductions, the new Duchess is pleased with everyone she's met so far. The only thing worrying her is the fact that she and Ian are still using separate rooms. It's not a big deal, especially considering the two of them haven't even kissed yet, but she's worried that this is a sign he's not expecting children from her. After all, she can't give birth to a legal heir since she herself is illegitimate. Does that mean he'll eventually turn to other women to, fulfill his duty? Ugh, that's so sad. Lorett doesn't sleep very well, but she's in a better mood when she wakes up the next morning to the smell of flowers floating in through the window. Alice starts brushing her hair while the mistress asks about the Duke. Even though he said he'd come to meet her, he's apparently been working since the early morning. Lorett is a little disappointed, but she decides to wait. He said he would come, and so far, he's been a man of his word. Let's hope this isn't the first time he lets her down. Without any plans for the day, she quickly becomes bored. Back at the mountain villa, she always had an endless list of chores to do. Now everything is done for her, and people follow her around with big bright smiles wherever she goes. Yeah, I think I would find that kind of creepy too. While exploring the grounds, one of the gardeners approaches her with a small bundle of pansy flowers. In flower language, pansies mean "think of me," which kind of stings when you think about it. That's exactly what she wants Ian to do, but still, there's no sign of him. She starts convincing herself that there must be some mistress waiting in the wings and gets so mad that she crushes the pansies in her fist. Damn, that poor gardener was probably just trying to make her day. 3 days pass before Lorett finally catches sight of her husband again. The servants quickly disappear to give them some alone time, but before Ian can even get a word out, she starts backing away. She's giving him the cold shoulder, I see. I mean, listen, we all know girls. If you give a girl 3 days of no contact, you're giving her a lot of time to think, and a lot of time to jump to conclusions. By now, she's assumed that her so-called husband was just doing her a favor by letting her stay here as his wife. In her mind, the best thing she can do is no longer cling to him and let him go and live his life with as many mistresses as he wants. Even though I think we all know that's not what this man is up to. Ian follows after her, asking her over and over again what's wrong. She starts literally jogging, but this man just won't quit. They come to a stop by a little pond where Ian grabs a fish straight out of the water, reminding her of their time in the mountains. Ian keeps trying to find little ways to make her laugh or lighten the mood, but Lorett is really not having it. She finally starts to voice her thoughts about how she hoped they would be able to stay friends and talk from time to time, even if he had other women. You probably don't need me to tell you that Ian is shocked. But his heart stops completely when Lorett suddenly turns and asks him if he'll have children with her. Give the man a break! His face is so red he could stop traffic. The Duke hadn't even thought that far, but he says if she really wants to later on, then why not? Lorett doesn't believe him. She then moves on to the topic of their separate rooms and asks why he didn't come to see her after he promised to. Apparently, the doctor ordered her to rest in private, and about the broken promise, well, the Duke was just so busy he didn't even know how many days had passed. Ian apologizes wholeheartedly. He assures Lorett that her position is secured. She is the Duchess by right, so there's no need to feel threatened by the thought of other women. It's a sweet sentiment, but somehow I feel that's not going to be enough to calm her fears. He brings her back to his office where a special visitor has finally arrived. It's that crazy cat from the mountains. He's got even fatter and even crazier while the two of them were away, but at least now they have a semblance of their old life together. With the kitty cat has also arrived a letter from a friend with some bad news. Not only has Rose Brumaire been busy making new friends across society, but she's been doing so while wearing Ian's mother's dress. The audacity! I guess she thought that by wearing something belonging to the Duke's family, people would start to think they have a good relationship and excuse the bad blood concerning Lorett. Well, she thought wrong. Clearly, the Brumaires are too ballsy for their own good. Ian's going to have to set them straight for good this time. Lorett notices the change in her husband's expression and asks what's wrong. He doesn't explain the situation with her sister, but instead invites her to a party. After all, they haven't had a chance to make their debut as a real couple yet. And there's no better time than now to rub their marriage in the Brumaire's face. Of course, that means the Duke needs to find a day that he's actually free to attend said party. At least their conversation seems to have calmed Lorett down quite a lot. She's much more at peace and is trying to accept her role as Duchess rather than simply a well-liked guest. Plus, these days, she has her kitty friend Ravizanes to keep her company on the days she can't meet Ian. One morning, she hears a commotion at the door. It sounds like the Duke is trying to visit his wife, but the nanny and Alice won't let him barge in so early in the morning. That's a true girl's girl right there. Nanny comes in and offers to turn him away, but before they can even wash her face, Ian storms in, earning him a pretty terrifying look from Nanny. He tells her to stop making such a scene, which only makes her madder. Does anyone else get the sense that if she wasn't technically his servant, this lady would have beat him round the block by now? Once Nanny finally clears out, Lorett and Ian get a chance to talk alone. Ian is grateful to see that she's not as mad as last time and suggests they go out to buy her a dress for the party. But it seems like his time is up. Alice and Irene kick the Duke out the moment they overhear their conversation. If this is going to be their first outing as a couple, Lorett needs to look as pretty as possible. And you have to give it to the girls. They certainly know how to make their mistress pretty. The twins toss her a hat for the finishing touch and allow her at last to rejoin her husband. When Lorett comes down the stairs, she takes him by surprise. Is it just me, or is he always blushing these days? Just like his servants, the Duke can't help but make a fuss when they're out, ordering every little thing she lays eyes on. Although, you wouldn't hear me complaining. Get me a man who wants to buy the whole boutique, am I right, girls? Lorett begs her husband not to go overboard, assuring him she doesn't need that many dresses. Ian hears her request and decides to only get the 10 most expensive dresses she tried on. Nice! Now that's a true gentleman. He's not just being cute, he's also trying to help his wife adjust to noble life. He's noticed that she always gets uncomfortable when things are being given to her. And since that's not going to stop anytime soon, she might as well get used to it. Plus, it doesn't hurt that she makes the sweetest little expressions whenever he buys her stuff. She even tries to stop him from signing the bill. Girl, just give in already. In the end, Ian has to gently pull her away and reassure her that he has more than enough money for this kind of thing. But it's not just these dresses she's upset about. Lorett still feels very guilty for losing his mother's precious gown. Ian kneels down and assures her that they can get the dress back anytime they want. At least they know who has it. Actually, it works pretty well with Ian's master plan to force the Brumaire family to pay heavily for treating their daughter like a servant and a punching bag. Lorett won't admit it, but she's very touched by his kindness. Not only does he want revenge for her sake, but he's also determined to treat her and constantly shower her with the affection she's been missing all her life. I'm telling you, this guy is a dreamboat. More than anything, being with Ian gives her a sense of hope. And for someone with her background, that's more precious than 100 expensive dresses. Lorett takes his hand, not knowing that her husband is dreaming of all the times he gets to make her smile again in future with little gestures just like this. Excited to make their first debut as a couple, they head home, where I'm sure the maids are eagerly waiting to see all her new dresses. A few weeks after the shopping spree, a banquet is held to commemorate the founding of the boutique family. It's the perfect opportunity to go out and show themselves in public. Since it's a big occasion, anyone who is anyone will be there, which means it's also the perfect place to run into Rose. The nobles start gossiping from the moment the banquet commences. Word has already got out about Lorett attending alongside the Duke. These foolish nobles also seem to have fallen for Rose's trick and believe it was given to her as a gift to smooth things over after the mess with the marriage contract. A young Miss Minia has bought a very fancy dress for a whole different reason. It seems some of the girls don't believe Lorett's marriage is stable and are hoping to catch the Duke's eye this evening. Fat chance, ladies! This girl, Minia, even has the nerve to walk up and introduce herself to the Duke right in front of his wife. At least, that's what she plans to do. So far, the Reinhardt couple are a no-show, and it's starting to get late. But don't worry, guys. The couple of the hour are here. They're just discussing strategy before they go inside. Lorett is worried about entering a room full of people who are clearly on her sister's side. But Ian promises not to leave her side, and besides, they look so good, I don't think anyone will be able to take their eyes off them the whole night. When their arrival is announced, Minia gets up to say hello, but she stops in her tracks the moment she catches sight of Lorett. The dress she's wearing is custom-made, and they're literally holding hands. Clearly, this isn't some contractual relationship that she can break up just like that. Minia caves and pretends to have a stomach ache all of a sudden, which is kinda pathetic. Meanwhile, Ian introduces his wife to Count Whitney, the owner of the famous cosmetics company. A few other people come up to the couple, asking why Rose isn't with them. Wow, these guys genuinely believe they're all best friends, don't they? I mean, how stupid can you be? Count Whitney tries to smooth over the conversation, clearly noting their negative reaction to Rose's name and how protective the Duke is over his wife. Ian handpicked him to spread the rumor of their happy marriage, basically so that they can one-up Rose's attempts to take them down. And he seems like the perfect guy for the job. People are already beginning to question what Rose was saying about their marriage being purely contractual, which, no duh, we've all seen how lovey-dovey they are together. And, would you know it, Rose Brumaire herself is about to enter the banquet. This timing is so good, I couldn't have planned it better myself. She was forced to come by her father, who still desperately wants to fix their relationship with the Reinhardt Duchy. Not like there's much hope of that. The moment she walks in, the air shifts. By now, everyone has realized she lied about her sister's marriage, so all eyes are on her. Rose comes to a halt before her ex-fiancé and sister, totally tongue-tied. Ian doesn't waste a single second. He confronts her right away about the rumor she's been spreading and asks her to explain herself. Rose is so embarrassed she can't even form an answer. Meanwhile, Lorett is finding the shift in power very interesting. For the first time in her life, she's not afraid of Rose, mainly because she truly cannot touch her. She asks Ian to give the sisters a moment alone, which he tries to resist. She assures her husband everything will be fine and greets her sister with a calm and civil tone. Rose is so twisted she can't even accept that Lorett is just being nice. She thinks she's trying to mock her or something. Lorett can see that she's freaking out and tries to wipe her tears. In return, she gets a slap. Can you believe that? In front of everyone, she decided to make her situation even worse. Now people not only think she's a liar, but also that she's crazy. Good job, Rose. Clearly, she's taking this whole situation as some attempt to humiliate her, which, let's be honest, it basically is. She starts yelling at her sister, but before the situation can get too out of hand, Ian steps in, and not a minute too late. He grabs her a little aggressively, squishing her cheeks to shut her up. It might be kinda cute if she wasn't in a flood of tears. The whole banquet is staring at them, so Lorett tells him to let her go. The Duke obviously isn't satisfied, but regretfully he shoves her backwards, causing Rose to fall on the ground. Like a little kid having a temper tantrum, she starts yelling at him for acting crazy. Like she wasn't the one who started it. She starts sobbing about how unfair it is that Lorett took her place next to the Duke when she was supposed to be the next Duchess. Honestly, girl, have some dignity. Lorett points out that this is the first time in their entire lives that Rose has wanted to swap places. She was always the one who had to put up with whatever her sister threw at her, and never once did Rose show an ounce of sympathy for her situation. So now, it's like a miracle come true that she gets to ascend beyond heights her sister could even dream of. Isn't that the best revenge of all? After that, Lorett calmly returns to her husband, assuring him she isn't hurt. But Rose isn't done. Still sitting on the floor like a baby, she curses her sister to a life of disease and abandonment, praying that one day she suffers twice as much as she did in the past. Yeah, I don't think that's gonna work out for you, bestie. After all, no one ever answered Lorett's prayers when she was younger. Finally, the Duke and Duchess exit the banquet to the sound of her sister's screams fading behind her. That girl really doesn't know when to quit. On their way back home, Ian has to stop off somewhere to take care of some urgent business, leaving Lorett waiting in the carriage. After a short while, he returns, apologizing for not taking her with him and promising to do so next time. He doesn't explain, but apparently there was a good reason he didn't invite her along. I don't know about you guys, but I think he just went to take care of some dirty work. It was definitely something he didn't want her to see. She catches sight of a little wooden doll that he brought from a toy maker. Ian is about to throw it out, but Lorett takes it instead since she never had a real doll to play with when she was younger. Ian then asks if they could take a walk, not wanting the night to end. While they're taking a stroll under the moonlight, Rose returns home to her mother, who is very displeased with her public breakdown at the banquet. Rose tries to defend herself, but the real trouble comes when her father gets home. He's so angry that he kicks her out, ignoring his wife's protestations. Rumor will soon go around about their family reputation, meaning they're basically doomed. There's no chance of them getting any new business deals now, and considering how bankrupt they already are, well, let's just say this might be the final straw for the old Brumaire family. In a last-ditch attempt to save them, it seems like the Count has pretty much begged someone to marry her. You might think she'd be furious, but Rose is so desperate to improve her rank that she's willing to try anything at this point. Who wants to bet this engagement is going to go up in flames just like the last one? Rose goes to visit this future husband of hers, but she's denied entry to his home by the maid. Since it's already late at night and her master isn't feeling well, she tries to turn the visitors away. But we all know how this girl handles rejection. Rose barges past the maid and forces her way into the mansion, wanting to see the Viscount for herself. His home is covered with toys and wooden dolls, strangely similar to the one that Ian picked up on their way home earlier. Was this the place he came to visit? Rose calls out for her future fiancé, but when the Viscount finally appears, he does not look happy to see her. I guess he already heard about the rumors and was hoping to call off the engagement. He yells at Rose for being so rude and orders her to go home at once, practically shoving her out the door. Once she's gone, he sits down with his head in his hands. It turns out the Duke did indeed stop by to warn him about the Brumaire family earlier that evening. He was so surprised that the famous Duke Reinhard would randomly pay him a visit, and couldn't figure out his intentions. Ian knew about the toy company the Viscount had set up and requested a doll for his wife. The Viscount was confused, mainly because he believed all the lies Rose fed him about how their marriage was forced and Lorett was a monster. Ian set him straight, bluntly explaining how he had just cast Rose out from noble society. He basically threatened the Viscount by implying that if he sided with Rose, he would become the Duke's enemy. What man in his right mind would still want to marry her after that? Blissfully unaware of all of this, Lorett is enjoying the berries they pick during their moonlit stroll while her husband watches her affectionately. He does want to explain what happened with the Viscount, but for now, this is something he should handle himself. She offers him the last few berries since she ended up gobbling most of them herself, but he's still wrapped up in a comment the Viscount made about how happy he looked when he spoke about his wife. I feel like now is a good time to mention how incredibly lucky this guy is that his wife is so oblivious. Like, he keeps slamming his head into things and blushing every 5 minutes, but she still doesn't seem to get it. And if you're wondering why he's so scared of catching feelings, that's because he truly believes Lorett wants nothing more than friendship, which is... these two are just as bad as each other. The next day, the happy and stupid couple are having tea in the gardens when Ian asks if she left any possessions behind at the Brummeyer estate. Little does she know, he's actually asking that because he's about to formally confiscate all the family's property. A few weeks later, Rose wakes up on her own, which is strange because usually someone comes to get her up in the mornings. She calls for the maids that usually stand outside, but there's no one there. Furious, Rose gets up and stomps outside, where a man in uniform is taking down a portrait in the hall. She suddenly realizes she's never seen this man before, and suddenly, everything hits at once. The house is totally empty. All of their possessions have disappeared. She tries to stop the man in uniform, but he doesn't even blink an eye. He even calls her a fallen noble and claims that she doesn't deserve special treatment anymore. Ouch! I didn't think it was possible, but I'm actually starting to feel kind of bad for this girl. She walks downstairs to find her mother overseeing the removal. Countess Brummeyer explains that the Duke filed a lawsuit and ended up in possession of the entire manor and all its belongings. Now all the luxuries Rose has enjoyed her whole life, including her outfits and even her reputation. Everything belongs to Duke Reinhardt. She refuses to accept that this could be the end of her family and orders them not to give up yet. Maybe if they go to the duchy, they can beg for forgiveness? Although, I don't think that's going to go quite as smoothly as she's expecting. While the Brummeyer's legacy is crumbling around them, their illegitimate daughter is sitting comfortably in the Reinhardt estate, reading a book about how to cook with dragons. Seems interesting. The Duke is still blushing every time he sees Lorett's adorable expressions, but his doting is interrupted when a maid announces the arrival of the Brummeyer family. Lorett has no idea what's going on, so her husband explains the whole confiscating property thing and apologizes for not telling her beforehand. She's a little surprised, but she doesn't seem mad. At this point, she's just willing to let the Duke do whatever he wants to satisfy his revenge. She's far more interested in this weird dragon cooking book, so she gives Ian permission to handle them however he wants. That's not going to be good for their visitors. When the Duke's men hold the Brummeyer family in front of the mansion, they start causing a scene, because, of course they do. They still expect to be treated like a noble family and don't seem to realize quite how far they've fallen from grace. Rose reminds her father to keep his mouth shut, as do the guards. Like, seriously, does he think they're going to get their stuff back by yelling and bad-mouthing their daughter? What kind of logic is that? The Count starts going off again about how Lorett is his daughter and he can say whatever he wants, which is perfect timing for the Duke to arrive. He points out that no one in the Brummeyer family ever treated her like a daughter and gives his knights permission to stab the visitors if they speak ill of his wife again. Damn, Ian is not playing around! Rose also seems like she's about to pop off after hearing that Lorett wasn't even bothered to come and see them. The only one with any sense is the mother, who begs the Duke for mercy. She asks for nothing except the right to continue living in their manor and promises to never bother the Duke and Duchess again. Of course, that wouldn't satisfy Ian, and besides, he's got something else in mind. He orders his knights to take them up north, where someone is apparently waiting to put them to work. Wow, so Rose's worst nightmare is really about to come true. I guess that's the end of that. While the Brummeyers are dragged away, kicking and screaming, the Duke returns to the mansion with a lighter heart and brings back a present for Lorett. Obviously, she is more interested in what happened with her family, so first, the Duke explains what he did and promises to destroy their old residence so that she'll never have to see them again. You have to give him credit. If Ian is anything, it's thorough. When Lorett opens the box, she finds none other than his mother's dress inside. It seems he also had another agenda when he confiscated their possessions. Lorett is so relieved to have it back, but weirdly, it's Ian who apologizes. The dress is so valuable that he didn't think about how many people would covet it, and promises to be more careful when giving her such flashy gifts in the future. Not like anyone would dare stand against her or steal her things again. Not now that she's with the Duke, at least. Lorett is so touched by the many things Ian has done to reassure her, and silently prays that she can stay beside this wonderful man for the rest of her life. Girl, just say it out loud! Maybe that way the two of you would finally realize you have feelings for each other. The next day starts a little strangely for Lorett. She's walking the halls as usual when she spots her husband, fully decked out in armor and even carrying a sword. What the heck is going on? Don't panic, there's not a war or anything. Apparently, he's just going to the arena for a farewell ceremony. A handful of knights are headed to the Magi Plains to investigate traces of a dragon that were said to be found nearby. Now, what you have to know about dragons in this world is that they're a very big deal. Once every 10 years, a savage dragon will appear, so terrifying and powerful that sometimes even several armies aren't enough to defeat it. Of course, it's easy to mistake signs of other predators as evidence of a dragon, so Ian warns his wife not to worry just yet. The knights are pleased to see the Duke and Duchess when they arrive at the stables, but Lorett is more interested in the horses. She seems to like them, but since she's never actually been around one before, the knights are very worried about the idea of her trying to ride one. Obviously, Ian doesn't have the same fears and immediately suggests she give it a go. He's not so good at reading the atmosphere, is he? At least he asks for a few days to find a horse of a suitable size and temperament, as well as protective headgear. But Lorett isn't worried about all that. She just grabs her husband's helmet and she's ready to go. I mean, not really. She can't even see through that thing. As if to prove it, she suddenly trips and falls into her husband's arms, awkwardly removing the helmet. But it seems like nothing will dull her excitement, and that's beginning to cause a problem for the young Duke. Every day, it's getting harder and harder for him to control his crush. He truly believes that Lorett only wants him in her life as a friend, so he sees those feelings as something he has to resist. Which is stupid if you ask me. They're already married, for crying out loud. A few days later, a bird returns with a letter from the Magi Plains, confirming that the evidence does indeed point to a dragon in the area. The men who were dispatched are returning right away to request reinforcements, which is not a good sign. Given the current information, the dragon is likely recently born and can't control its powers yet, or it could be about to hatch. In either case, they need to find out if the parents are still hanging around and destroy it before it becomes a real danger to the people. They gather as many extra knights as they can. For the time being, it looks like Ian will be too busy to worry about his crush. I just hope Lorett doesn't get upset again when she doesn't see him for a few days. Actually, she comes to see him pretty soon after, having heard the news about the plains and the dragon from the twins. Ian apologizes for not telling her sooner and confesses that her horseback riding lessons will have to be delayed. But Lorett isn't worried about her lessons. She's concerned about the state of the duchy and whether they'll be able to keep the people safe or not. As a gesture of her concern, she returns the knight's helmet to the Duke, lending it to him while he goes to deal with the dragon. Right, not like it was his in the first place or anything. Lorett doesn't want to take up any more of his time while things are so tense, so she wishes him good luck and leaves. Why do I get the feeling that just made his crush 10 times worse? The next day, the rest of the knights are all prepared to head out with their Duke leading the charge. It looks like things are going to be a little quiet around the mansion for some time, but Ian assures his wife that the very best of his knights are staying here to protect her. And that includes our old friend Count Requila, who reintroduces herself to Lorett. She and her guards will form the bulk of her protection while the others are away. Although they're very professional, they have a very different vibe from the other guards Lorett has become familiar with. These next few weeks, the mansion might be a little boring. The Duke finally mounts his horse and heads off, telling Lorett to stick with Nanny if there are any issues. You remember those noble knights we mentioned before who hadn't returned to the Duke's service because of complicated contracts? Well, after Ian made an example of the Brumaire family, they all came rushing back pretty quick. Everyone except 6 key knights. Now, Count Requila is having a headache trying to figure out what to do with them. She orders the remaining knights to gather in the training grounds, but not one person shows up. Looks like she's gonna have to play bad cop if she wants these lazy knights to cooperate. Speaking of the slackers, they're currently having a meeting of their own, trying to figure out if it's worth defying the Reinhardt orders or not. They seem to have an issue with Count Requila and also don't support the new Duchess. One of the Duke's men arrived to give them a very clear warning. Anyone who does not attend the meeting when they are summoned will be expelled from the mansion immediately. The knights are outraged that Requila would have the audacity to threaten them so obviously. These are the most skilled and high-ranking knights in Reinhardt's company, known as the Ravenheart team. But they're still in some way bound by their contracts with the Duke. So when Raedra calls, they have no choice but to answer her summons. The only one who continues to refuse is Sir Mason, who is old enough to be able to use his health as an excuse. Rumors of dissent are spreading quickly through the house. No one's going to undermine the Duchess, not if Nanny has anything to say about it. She unites the servants and decides to make a little network of spies, so that if anyone continues to mock the Duke's authority or defy orders, they'll be able to report it at once. When the knights finally gather that afternoon, Requila is disappointed to see that Sir Mason is absent. He's one of the strongest knights they've ever had, so it's unlikely that this excuse about him being ill is genuine. She's tempted to summon him again, more forcefully this time, but surprisingly, it's Lorett who encourages her to proceed. They walk down side by side to greet the gathered knights. There's a bit of tension. Requila seems so angry that she's struggling to fulfill her duties. But with the Duchess's encouragement, she's able to begin, ordering the knights to pull out their swords and re-swear their oaths of loyalty to House Reinhardt and to the Duchess. At first, no one moves. But when they spot Nanny storming towards them with eyes like an angry dragon, they have a little team talk. They don't want to make an enemy out of Nanny, and if the servants and maids stop looking after them, life could get very uncomfortable. They're about to greet the Duchess properly, but she's already heading back inside. She runs into Nanny and the head chef, who encourage her to go in and have some cake, while giving some pretty threatening signals to the disobedient knights. Okay, I love Nanny. Who else could force such arrogant boys to act respectful? I just hope they continue to act politely from now on. While all that drama is going down at the mansion, the Duke and his men have finally arrived at the plains. But things haven't gone as well as they had hoped. The hunt for the dragons has turned up almost nothing, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. I mean, how hard is it to find something the size of a small village that flies in the sky? Like, how good are these dragons at hide and seek? Plus, a few scraps they found are not signs of a baby, but a fully fledged adult dragon. In that case, it's possible that the one they're hunting caught sight of the knights and flew elsewhere, perhaps towards the capital. Even just hearing mention of the city makes Ian miss his wife. She promised to send letters every week, but he wants to know how she is right now, if she's been eating enough, if she's been bored. Okay, let's be honest, this isn't a crush anymore, this is full-scale simpery. One of his men offers him a sip of whiskey, and he accidentally says his wife's name in response. Oh, buddy, get it together! He's not even safe at night. When he falls asleep, he dreams of being in bed with her, but things are a little off. She's very forward, not at all like the cute, embarrassed woman that he married, and she keeps laughing randomly. Is it just me, or is this a little creepy for a late-night fantasy? Just as things are getting steamy, she pushes him away, laughing, and tells him to wake up. Back in the war camp, the Duke sits bolt upright in bed, humiliated by his own imagination. This man seriously needs to confess, otherwise, I'm starting to think he'll be stuck in the friend zone until he dies. Back at the duchy, the disobedient knights are being punished for their attitude by the kitchen staff, who seem to have stopped serving any meat with their meals. When the food arrives for dinner, they sit up, hopeful that they might have been forgiven and can go back to having exquisite meals prepared by the head chef. But they're out of luck. Today, they're being served steak-shaped bread with a single tiny piece of broccoli for dinner. Okay, you have to admit, that's kind of hilarious. One of the knights starts to get mad. After all, they need nutrition to do their jobs correctly. But the kitchen maid says they're just short on staff these days since the ancestral ceremony is coming up. Sounds like a good excuse, if the moody knight didn't know that the ceremony is more than 3 weeks away. Meanwhile, in the main building, the others are eating like kings and are very happy with the little scheme they've pulled off. Lorett interrupts Nanny's dinner to ask for a list of ingredients. She's planning to make juice to thank Count Requila for all her hard work. Even though she asked for a kind of insane amount of produce, the head chef and Nanny promise to fulfill her request. They also assure her that the Duke will come back perfectly healthy from the expedition, since she seems to be worrying about him. Things would be so easy if one of them just confessed. The next day, Lorett gathers with the maids to prepare the ingredients for the juice. They're a little doubtful about the taste, since the Duchess didn't request any ice or sugar, but she's just going off what she remembers. Back in her childhood, when it hurt too much to chew after her beatings, she made something similar with just fruit, milk, and herbs. After hearing her sob story, brave Irene offers to try the drink, probably expecting it to be awful, but it's delicious. And soon all the maids are having a glass, promising to make their own versions at home. Aw, sweet little Lorett. At this rate, even the maids will be simping after her. And that's it for today, guys. What did you think? As always, don't forget to like the video and comment for the next part so we know you want more. Remember to subscribe and turn on notifications for updates. See you in the next one!